let me. So with that, I will hand over to Noan, who's going to introduce some of the different organizational experiences.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So as Lynn mentioned, we have three presentations today, starting with Christian Aid, who's going to share the experience of using GCT in Ukraine, then followed, Christian Aid's presentation is going to be presented by Matthew, who introduced himself earlier. Then we have a presentation by DCA from Valentine Kitor, who's going to share some experiences of using GCT in Turkana County, Kenya. And then Shreju is going to take us through the experiences of Oxfam in different locations. If I'm not wrong, it's South Sudan, Burkina Faso, Lebanon, and then Ukraine. We have asked the presenters to focus on the main elements that contribute to the strengths and weaknesses of using GCT, because it would allow us, it would allow this group of having a little bit of greater visibility of what activities can be done in the mid to long term. So without further ado, I will pass over to Matthew, and then we will complete the free presentation, and then we'll have the Q&A at the end. Over to you, Matthew.
Okay, great. Do I have control, or do you want to just move on the slides?
You can tell us to move the slide.
Okay, great. Just move forward. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about using SCLR and group cache in sudden onset crises. The majority of this evidence comes from Ukraine, but also some of it comes from Haiti. And we've published stuff on that. There's a report, I don't know if Simone, you wanted to share the link in the chat, the Letting Go of Control report that we wrote on this, but I'll give you some of the key highlights now. Firstly, though, we'd just like to highlight the differences that we're starting to see in survivor and community-led response and group cache transfers. We're starting to see a bit of a distinction growing. There's a table there which may be of use, or it may not be of use to some of you in terms of understanding how we're seeing the differences. The sort of top lines are we see SCLR much more on what you would consider the soft side components. So there's a lot more accompaniment. It's much more endogenous in its approach in that sense, and so it also, SCLR we don't see as fitting within the humanitarian architecture sort of in any way, or it will be very difficult to shoehorn it in. Group cache grants, on the other hand, are a tool that you can use potentially for rapid scale up. They can, because of their nature, be slightly seen as fitting the humanitarian architecture, because it could in some senses be almost like MPCA, but at a group level, you know, like seeing it through that lens. So there is slight distinction, and a lot of whether you would go with one or the other kind of depends on the context, what your delivery chain is. We've found that SCLR works better, obviously, when done through local partners, but when we're working with the local partners directly, we found if you have any other form of intermediaries in the way, you know, through consortium or through an INGO or something that then adds an extra link in the chain, it becomes a little bit protracted. So that's one area. There's a few other variables about why you would choose one or the other. So that's kind of the introduction. So for the rest of it, we'll be talking a little bit indistinctly. We'll be lumping them together as group cache transfers, but we did want to make that point at the beginning about the distinction. So we can move on maybe to some of the successes, I think, or the strengths. So one thing we found is that they can work very well in sudden onset emergencies. Perhaps previously there was a bit of a assumption that these tools would be less applicable to sudden onset crises, but what we've seen is that they leverage the great work of what's already happening through those spontaneous responses already, and in that sense they're a great tool for local action. The sheer fact that they build on what is already happening locally makes them somewhat distinct, in the sense of very often with localization we're asking why are local actors not joining the cluster system, or why they're not joining the coordination mechanism. The emphasis is on, quote unquote, them to join us, whereas SCLR and to some extent group cash transfers is the international aid system channeling funds to pre-existing coordination structures and building on what is already there. That helps with social cohesion, it helps generate a sense of ownership, and it really flips the narrative in a number of respects. Also, because of that, they have some tangible benefits. They are actually often faster approaches than other forms of assistance. It's not to say that it should be a battle, so to speak, between the two, but we like to see them as a complement to the formal humanitarian architecture in that sense. So those are some of the strengths that we've seen using SCLR or group cash transfers in both Ukraine and Haiti. If we move on, I don't know if one of the things we just wanted to say is, like, letting go of control does not mean sort of transfer and forget. So if you don't have the capacity to walk side by side with people, you might need more vertical accountability. So one of the differences we've seen in SCLR and group cash transfers is that the SCLR approach does lean more heavily on what we would call horizontal accountability, people in the community being held accountable by their peers, rather than audit trails or donors and things like that. And it's often less tangible and more on perception and things than paperwork, for example. But if you don't have people on the ground to help monitor and work and accompany with that, you are probably going to need to use more vertical accountability. It will inevitably mean you need those assurances in a more traditional way. We've not found particular evidence of outright fraud at the moment. I mean, but some of the issues is moving it more into a program quality and partnerships discussion. Sometimes when we've used group cash transfers potentially without the close accompaniment, when we see the types of interventions that have been selected, occasionally there could be an argument that there could be an argument that some of those decisions would potentially have been better with a greater degree of discussion by different stakeholders in the room. That's not to say control or supervision from us, so to speak, but more prompting about vulnerable groups and other things like that. So yeah, we can move on. The top point also, SCLR, in theory, we found is really based on appreciative inquiry and using existing capacities, but very often when it is applied in rapid onsets, it's just inherent that people tend to focus more on talking about needs rather than capacities. Although, I mean, it does come through, and we do build on a number of good, it does build on a number of good initiatives. But very often people do see it as to some extent, a group cash transfers are sometimes seen as MPCA at group level as such, focused on needs. The main challenge and weaknesses is about fitting with the formal humanitarian architecture. In that sense, reporting, we tend to tie ourselves in knots over how to report this. It's not an easy fit with the current humanitarian system. Many donors don't necessarily know about this process yet or acknowledge it as such. And even donors who do, sometimes the information isn't disseminated yet. So we've heard cases of in some locations of ECHO TAs, for example, being skeptical of the approach, even though it is within the ECHO policy. As I mentioned before, another weakness, so to speak, would be depending on the length of the contract chain, it might affect whether you're doing a group cash transfer or FCLR. Sometimes contract chains now get quite protracted through UN, through INGO, often INGO to another INGO to a local partner, various other things. SCLR tends to work best when it is with one link in that chain rather than several intermediaries. Yep. What's needed to increase the use? The first one is, again, because it doesn't fit so well in the system, it would work much better with area-based approaches. We have some high hopes, maybe, for the flagship initiative that we're seeing rolled out in 4 countries and piloted soon, because, as we'll see, it's a bit of a square peg in a round hole in some cases. And we also need to reshape the concept of financial accountability. I just mentioned a bit of that tension between horizontal accountability and vertical accountability. So really shifting the power and making that the emphasis is on local communities to hold each other accountable in that sense, rather than relying so much on policies and processes. But that will require more aid sector reform, because even if on the programmatic side of donors or INGOs, everyone is in agreement, if the terms and conditions stay the same, the financial reporting requirements stay the same, all of that, it will be harder to implement. And then the other thing is build on what good policy does exist. I mentioned ECHO, saying ECHO's got it's in their policy. We've got the CALP guidance now. There is good institutional legitimacy there. We need to leverage it and use it more to encourage more of the same. Next slide. Yep. So this is basically the summary. It's a bit like I was saying with in terms of the overall system, it's the same as cash in general. We're trying to put a very nice square tool into a round hole. So we need to try our best to maybe change the shape of the hole rather than spend time convincing ourselves that the tool we have is round. And that is everything from me. I hope that was quick enough. Sorry, I may have overrun.
Thank you so much, Matthew. We'll keep the question for Matthew at the end. We'll move to the next presentation now by Valentine. Thank you.
Good afternoon from Kenya, everyone. I am Valentine Kitur. I am the Programs Assistant working with Done Church Aid. Please allow me to present on behalf of our local partner organization, SAPCON, who are based in Lodwar, Turkana County, where the GCT interventions were implemented. So we go back 1 year ago when SCLR was introduced to us as an organization at the Kenya Country Office, and this was subsequently implemented by SAPCON in Turkana County here in Kenya. Next, please. So 1 year down the line, in terms of strengths that we've noticed in using group cash transfers in relation to SCLR, is that the use of GCT is much cheaper compared to the magnitude of interventions done, as it tends to have a ripple effect to all the community members, since the intervention being implemented by the local community groups have a bigger impact to other community members. As compared to the cost that would have been incurred in implementing, an approach or an intervention for each household. The SLR approach has also reduced administration requirements since they have lower operational costs as compared, for instance, if you were to compare it with a multiple cash transfer to households. It has also strengthened horizontal accountability between local community themselves and SAPCON, who is the implementing partner. I will agree and concur with Matthew that there is need for more horizontal accountability and less vertical. Also, the interventions that are implemented through the group cash transfer are tailor-made, they're contextualized to fit the local context in Turkana. For those who are not well versed with Turkana County in Kenya, this is a very vast county. It is the largest in the 47 counties, occupying a land of 77,000 kilometers square. So you can imagine how sparsely populated the whole county is. So in undertaking these interventions, then using SLR was able to tailor-make these interventions to fit the local context of this huge county. Just a minute. SLR, in our view, has also improved the status of women in the and marginalized groups, as it takes a strong angle of involvement of this group in the implementation process. Women, youth have actively been engaged in most of these community groups. So through SLR, we've seen that it has been able to leverage on the strength of women and the young people who are often marginalized in this context. SLR is also faster and flexible with fewer bureaucracies of transfer once the community takes over. Yes, we could move to the next. So what are we learning as the challenges that we've encountered so far 1 year down the line? When this approach was introduced, we felt that it took a bit longer to roll out this approach to the communities, since the aspect of SLR is actually there within the communities. But in April 2022, when this was rolled out, so it took quite some time to gain traction and and get things rolling. But we shall be implementing this year for the third time, and so far so good. We've seen it gain momentum, and it's even better in this third phase in 2023. The other issue would be the issue of budgets. Low and fixed budgets sometimes are not flexible enough to support the real challenges in the community. For example, when we began, we supported each community group with Kenya shillings 150,000. That's around $1,500 USD. So some of the interventions that the community would have loved to implement would not be matching with the budget, like some are more costly and needed more money. So that was somehow limiting. The other challenge would be the accountability of funds when using mobile cash transfer. For instance, here in Kenya, we have what is commonly or famously known as the M-Pesa. M-Pesa stands for mobile money, where money is sent via mobile phones. So for instance, considering the informal groups who do not have bank accounts and all those other formal, if I may put it in quotes, way of accessing money, then the money is sent via M-Pesa to one of the officials of the group. So what does this mean then? Unlike the bank transactions where maybe 2 or 3 members of the group are the signatories, then the money goes to one person's phone. So, if, for instance, let's take it as an example, if the person decides to just wake up and leave with their phone, that is how the money has disappeared. But so far we've not encountered this, and we are also keen on it. And the good thing is the community themselves are quite keen on being accountable. That is more horizontal accountability. The other challenge I'd say is the current high inflation and transportation costs in Kenya. Kenya experienced very high inflation rates last year, which stood at over, I think, 10%. So what did that mean? The cost of transportation, the cost of fuel went very high, the price of commodities skyrocketed. And this would mean, placing this in context of Turkana, where most the community groups who are supporting are located quite rural in the villages, which are far from the main center or town, which is Lodwar town. Communities will travel over, 100 kilometers or more to even maybe buy whatever they need to implement in the interventions. For instance, if a community group wanted to put up a water tank for the community, then the cost of transporting these materials went very high, meaning at the end of the day, it lowered the final amount that the communities wanted were working with. Also, Matthew mentioned this somewhere in his presentation. There's the glaring challenge of low capacity amongst communities. That's the technicality of implementation. Some of the community groups may not be well versed on how to implement interventions that need a technical experience. Let's take, for instance, a community that wanted to do farming, for instance. So in our context, Turkana is a very dry county. So this would mean that this group would need the services of an agricultural extension officer, someone with technical expertise to guide them on what crops to plant, the drought-resistant crops. So if community is not empowered or are not supported to get such assistance, then it becomes challenging for them to implement their own interventions successfully. Let's move. So in our opinion, what are the global efforts that we need to advance the group cash transfer? Implementing agencies in our context, such as TAPCON, need to provide more support and guidance to community groups as they begin to let go and handing over power to communities. Like last year when we introduced this approach, it was necessary for us to provide the much needed support to this and guidance to the communities, and just let them, take over and implement their intervention. The other efforts that could aid this is the use of GCT in deliberate efforts to strengthen capacity to engage community groups. That is providing further cross-learning to further strengthen this approach. This could be even among the local community groups themselves, because we have them there in the community. So it's just a matter of strengthening their their capacity, their understanding, and letting them know how they're also in charge of their own interventions. The use of GCT also can be used as a preparedness tool to support emergency response. In our case, SLR was implemented alongside the multi-purpose cash transfer following the severe drought experience last year in Kenya. Also, we implement the use of GCT as part of longer-term response, such as alongside resilient livelihood interventions. So the need for sustainability and not just a one-time off. Also, we could introduce and advocate for group cash transfer within international and even local NGOs, through the GCT team here. And lastly, the creation of more awareness, or in short, the paradigm shift among local communities on the immense power that lies within them by local implementing agencies. For instance, in this case, TAPCON, with the local communities in rural Turkana, the communities it feels like they just need to be reignited on the immense power that lies within them, and they're just good to go. why we are saying this is also to change the mindset of what people have always termed as the over-reliance or over-dependence of the communities on international and local NGOs. So what about if we change, and push the ball to that other side so that the communities can also notice the immense power that lies within them. Next, please. So what do we think, in our opinion, are the activities that can be undertaken by the GCT task team to support these priorities in the mid and long term? Continuously supports implementing agencies such as CAPCON to advocate within organizations and to donors for group cash transfers as an effective response action. Yes, this can be scaled through advocacy, and letting donors also understand the effectiveness of a group cash transfer in humanitarian response or any other form of response. Also, creation of a strong community of practice, participation in sector working groups and forums, just like other thematic areas, to enable it to fully gain traction for international and national NGOs. I think an example can be what we are doing here right now. And we also have the East Africa community of practice here in Kenya that is leveraging on the organizations that are implementing SDLR. This is still new here in Kenya. But then when we gain experience from other implementing organizations, then we get to understand their challenges and also learn a lot from them. Also advocating for the inclusion of group cash transfer as a modality that could be used in the humanitarian, livelihoods, health, peace, and other thematic areas context to advance ownership and capacities of communities' resilience. So the other thing could be having a collaborative action and learning platforms where implementing agencies can pause and reflect as well as extend phases to enable in-depth understanding of different contexts, gaps, and opportunities within the approach. I had mentioned that the East Africa SDLR Community of Practice, once in a month we sit down to reflect and pause, and learn from our colleagues and counterparts implementing this from Ethiopia, Uganda, and on how they are doing this and the experiences in general. And then strengthen capacity for the implementing partners to partake in outcome harvesting that can be documented and used regularly by all and new partners to inform better decision and adaptation of this approach. If we are able to strengthen, the capacity of local partners, for example, SAPCON that is implementing in Turkana County, then we could do better outcome harvesting, even for documentation for other old and new partners to learn from us. Next, please. That's all. Asante sana. Asante, thank you in Swahili. I hope that was informative for everyone. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Valentine. This was indeed very informative. In terms of the suggestions, there are quite a bit of activities that are reflected in the updated work plan for this task team, and you can share your feedback in the second half of the meeting when Tobias present the work plan later. Okay, now we're moving to the last presentation for today by Shreju from Oxfam. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be presenting this in this forum. I just wanted to mention that this presentation provides an overview of our experiences so far in group cash transfer, and we can discuss later if there are any questions on specific pilots that we did. Yeah, you can move ahead with the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background where Oxfam is at. So we started in 2021 as part of the CashTag team to like supporting the guidance and toolkits on GCT, which we are all referring to. And as soon as that was out, we were geared in Oxfam to kind of do the pilots to test the new toolkit, right? So we did this in Burkina Faso, Lebanon, South Sudan in the year 2021 itself. And we did various GCT projects, which included like livelihood wash activities and also environmental activities, which we can see a little bit more in detail later. The other thing that we did in 2022, when we came in 2022, we focused on Poland response as well, and like how the GCT approach could be used in a refugee setting to support the host and the refugee communities. And this year, again, GCT has been a priority area for Oxfam, and we seek to expand the use of it as an approach and expand it to DRR and anticipatory action as well. And obviously the mapping of the work we have done in various countries as part of group cash transfer or as a survivor and community-led crisis response as well, so that we have evidences coming for us from various responses. And yeah, so maybe next slide. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the pilots that we did in these 4 countries, we actually have taken out a learning document on that. If you guys are interested, I've also put the chat in the text box, which you can go and see. So there are 2 documents, particularly in the group cash transfer approaches and the learning document, which highlights the learnings from all these 4 pilots that Oxfam has been part of. And we also have a GCT approach fact sheet that is just a 1-pager, which requires like just a short period of time to go through it. So we are using these kind of communication materials that would be useful for within Oxfam and also for external use. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we recognize the vast usefulness of the approach and the various objectives that it can fulfill. But in Oxfam, we tried to like focus on some of the objectives which were relevant to our local humanitarian leadership and also what could be done in the ground. So number 1 being facilitating the local humanitarian leadership, the other being that expanding the CVA to groups from individual and families to support community-led response. And obviously the transfer of power area that is really a strength of the GCT to the crisis-affected population. The other one we focused was to empower vulnerable groups through financial resources and capacity development opportunities. And also for the GCT to facilitate a shift from sectoral silos. And this was very important for us because I think, and also maybe majority of challenges, but I've also heard from previous presenters that, you know, that there are like various sectors or like humanitarian sectors that we are used to working, which group cash transfer kind of goes through it. So it was kind of like our major objective to also see how this approach can be used to shift away from the sectoral silos like we have in WASH, food, shelter, and some cross-cutting issues of gender inclusion and so forth as well. The other point that we wanted to, as an objective was to process the processes around the GCT and the actual cash transfer provided us the opportunity to support the first responders in initiating and continuing community-led actions and responses. Next slide, please. So yeah, so as I was mentioning, our pilots in these various countries supported us to gather some key learnings. And we did see that, as again, like my previous presenters, that it definitely helped us in the economic empowerment of the women's group that we supported. And just to be mentioning that we did focus majority of the women groups for these pilot activities to see the effects, and it showed that they did feel empowered in the sense that they were like happy to be their participation and visibility to be very highlighted in the community as in their economic activities, which helped them to make positive changes in the community. The other thing that came out was it helps in enabling informal groups to participate in local humanitarian leadership, which is often left out in these spaces. So it helped us to also recognize that learning. The other was like supporting and transferring resources to communities. It also stimulates or helps us in contributing localization, recovery, and resilience. And this is also one of the reasons why we kind of have expanded the GCT to include also anticipatory action and DRR work in the future, because it has such a wide reach. But yeah, again, we do recognize that it requires constant follow-ups and constant checkups. So the other thing that also wanted to mention that it also showed that it helped us in creating like the social cohesion, like the example from the South Sudan pilots. It was very clear that it helped to bring two tribal groups like in the Rumbek area together and to help them to work together. So that was a great experience. The other is allowing for a variety of capacity building activities. Although the grant is like for the communities of their priority needs, we also took this opportunity to provide other kinds of capacity building activities that they required. So that was very helpful as well. The other point being that the risk assessment. So we actually did a risk assessment for each and every groups that we were supporting the grant with. So that helped us, like as each group was very different to the other, that helped us to identify the particular risks of the grant to those groups and made us like, you know, prepare from the beginning to mitigate those. So I think that was a great learning that we would also like to continue going in the future. And yeah, needless to say, it's locally adaptable as depending upon the needs in the ground and finding the balance of the locally relevant approaches according to the context and phase of emergency, whether it's transition like or in development. So it helped us, like, for example, in the case of Poland, where we have used it in larger extent, we tried to see how the group cash transfer could be flexible and how we could use that approach to flexibly utilize it in the way that is in the needs of the ground. So definitely that would be one of the key learning for us. Next slide, please. And of course, there were challenges in doing this. So in terms of some challenges and more, you can see the learning document, but just wanted to highlight some here. The first being the challenging mindset to support new type of programming, right? So this is like within our organization as well as in the communities, like the adoption of the concept of this in the emergency response was a bit challenging in the beginning with the teams internally as well, but also in the community level, like what is this? Like they were like, oh, you're giving us cash to do this, but how does this work? And so they needed a lot of like, you know, the to and fro's and discussion around it, and the trust building around it was one of the major things that we had to work really hard on. And also internally, again, I also want to highlight that working outside of the sectors for the holistic needs is one of the things that we, again, had to put a lot of effort in, because it is not clear, oh, you're working for EFSPL project or for a protection project. It's just like, you know, what is the need that is coming from the community? So we needed to, like, all the team come together and discuss about it and how could we support them and what are they really wanting to do, right? So those kind of things were kind of the things that we were discussing right from the beginning. And also regarding the roles and responsibilities in the operations, let's say when we're doing this, like who will take the responsibility, because we don't have a GCT team to implement this activity. We are just coming together as like, you know, program team and doing this, but also like the cross-cutting team. So that was one of the things that also wanted to highlight, and will be also too happy to hear from others' experience how you've been doing that. The other thing is regarding the compromise and the settle for a phase-wise cash plus approaches in GCT. And what I mean here is like we realize that there is so much plethora of like, you know, things that the GCT approach could do in emergencies or in transition, but we had to like pick pick some of the things which were important at that moment so that we could get tangible results, right? So we had to compromise on like what is the objective that we are trying to see at this moment, rather than saying that, oh, like this is like a one-stop shop for everything, it's going to solve every problem. So the compromise was needed there, and we recognize that it is a phase-wise approach and we need to move in that manner. The other point is regarding ensuring effective communication and consistent stakeholder engagement. So yeah, was very important for us to do it, because there is the chances of, like, as Matthew and Valentine were also mentioning, as long as how the layers become longer, the communication becomes very difficult. So maintaining that communication, especially while you were going through like the partner-led responses, which we did in Lebanon, was we had to put a lot of effort in that, and how to make sure that the right kind of communication is passing through and also coming to us, so that we can work together on this. So that we continue to do those. And it also included the capacity enhancement of our internal team, but also, again, about the GCT approach and operations, evidence building and mapping, which would help us to be very communicative about this approach. And that is also the reason why we have these two documents published. And another one is like regarding the time intensiveness and heavy internal systems and compliance. So there was a little bit of discussion within our own internal processes of how do we go about it, right? Because Oxfam has a set of like financial regulations for CVA and logistics regulations. So we found it quite kind of coming in between the operations as well. So we are now revising our Oxfam's financial guidance to be more open to GCT as we speak. So that has helped us to rethink it, like for maintaining that flexibility of this responses as well. And lastly, again, we also wanted to recognize that GCT at the humanitarian coordination level and spaces is not recognized yet, and even at the local government. So we do need to do some work there in terms of advocacy, or internally and externally, actually, and also with donors. Definitely in the sub-working group that is here would be very beneficial on doing that and creating spaces for it. And we've done that at the Poland and other spaces as well, how to recognize group cash transfer as part of a multi-purpose cash transfer to groups, right? So these kind of things are being done at the country level, but it would be great to have that, joint forces and how to make these recognized so that it becomes more widely used and the positives be reaped. So I think this is it from my side at this moment, but happy to discuss further. And if there's any questions, then happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fredru, and thank you for sharing the documents which provide an extensive account on the different evidence that you have collected in different locations. That's very useful. Now we have about 15 minutes for question and answers for the three presenters. So I'll let you guys lift your hands and we'll give you a turn to ask your questions for each organization. Thanks.
No, and Matthew has his hand up. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, my question would be for Shriju, like, how are you actually? Could you explain a little bit more about what financial processes you're changing? Is it something to do with thresholds? Is it something to do with due diligence, passporting? Is it something to do with reporting and audit documentation and requirements, or which aspects are you trying to do to actually unblock the process? Or more broadly, which of those things do you consider, which is the biggest blockage that you're finding?
Thank you. I don't know, Lynn, how would you like to go about this? Should we answer one by one or together?
Yeah, why don't you just start with this one by one. I don't know if Noan's still there. I know she's having some childcare challenges today.
No worry. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah. So I think for us, the major challenge was that like our internal processes for the finance and for logistics as well, like, you know, especially while working with partners. So treating the groups as partners was one of the major challenge, like at the local level, at the country level, let's say. But the like, you know, the idea of the group cash transfers is a little bit different on like providing the local leadership, right, at the local level. So making those processes easy so that they are not duplications of, like, you know, we are not kickstarting our like logistics processes and treating them as partners rather as beneficiaries. So that is the wider discussion that we are having at an affiliate level, and how can we tackle that and make sure that our finance, logistics, and program teams realize it, and and make environment good for this approach to go forward.
Tobias, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to add on to what Sheresh was saying. Also, in this year, we had to create what we call a flexible financial support guideline, where we wanted to treat those groups as beneficiaries, not as, you know, as partners or as local, because, you know, there are thresholds that we wanted to for them. For example, they are given from $200 to $7,000. So wanted to make sure that whenever we are talking about GCT or SLR, they get that money without following the guidelines, the financial guidelines of partners, but just as beneficiaries, so that it's easier for audits and also easier for ourselves. So that's what we did as well, to create that guideline, financial guideline. Yeah.
Great to hear that. And maybe an addition also regarding the monitoring, right? Like how do we monitor the groups, and what are the monitoring procedures that we're putting in place?
Okay.
Juan Watson.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. The first question is, how you have dealt with some of the challenges coming from local authorities. Sometimes local authorities might interfere in the process, in selection of the type of interventions, and we have had this kind of experience in Yemen. That's one. And second question is about the transfer amounts. I mean, there might be different amounts for different groups, and that sometimes results in kind of conflicts between groups, or one group might feel that they receive less and another, that kind of thing. So what are the main kind of principles that guide us to make or to determine the transfer amount when we do group cash? I mean, I know there are some ranges, but sometimes it's very, very difficult to communicate that to different groups. Over to you.
And is this question for one organization in particular, or just any presenters who want to answer?
I think I just want to listen from others' experience, how they have dealt with this kind of challenges. And this is the challenges we have faced in Yemen, where we have started piloting a group cash in some of our program areas, but still it is at an early stage. But this is some of the things, some of the challenges we have faced at the beginning of this pilot.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
I can answer. I can.
Sure, go on, Tobias.
Yeah, especially the first question around, authorities having some ideas on who to select or which group to look for. I know, for example, SELA, this local to global, they develop some tools around what they call PALC processes, this participatory action learning framework, where you you involve the whole community in identifying some of these groups that they know, that they are supporting, they are trusted, they are, they know which groups, whether it's a group of women or group of young men who are doing great job, and everyone will have a good say about them, or say good things about them. And if you do that, if you select those groups, normally you find even authorities will not, if you have proof that you selected those groups based on the community consensus or understanding or agreement, normally the authorities, you find they will say yes, is fine, you can go ahead. I know there are in other countries, obviously the authorities will have a lot of say to say choose this other group and not other group. Then in terms of values, I mean, transfer values to different groups based on different projects or different activities that they want. I think this horizontal accountability thing that they were talking about, everyone was talking about, to say we need to be open, you need to give reason why you are giving group A 5,000, the other group 2,000. It will be because of their activity value or amount of money that they want to spend. And if you are open to the authorities to say that we are giving this 2,000 because they want to do a school, this one 5,000 because they want to do a road from here to here, and it will cost so much based on the costs that are relevant in that particular context. Normally you find there are a few challenges. Yeah, I know it's normally a challenge to really justify from one group to another why you are giving more, you are giving less. Yeah, that's what I can say now.
Thanks, Tobias. I hope this was helpful. Wanwasen?
Yeah. More or less, we have also followed the same kind of strategy to deal with these challenges, like, doing more of sensitization and, trying, the local authorities and target communities understand, what we have been trying to achieve and why, we have been doing what we are doing. That kind of strategy is there, but it's really very important, even though we have, managed, to these challenges. It took us a lot of time, and it delayed, some of the activities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So we have perhaps time for another last question. Simone?
Thank you. Well, more than a question, was just a follow-up from what Tobias was saying. Just to flag that at least there's a bit of a mixed match between the use of group cash transfer and SLR. They're slightly different. I guess the group cash transfer focus a little bit more on just of the micro granting bit, but as Tobias has well explained, SLR goes a little bit further, and it is really the community engagement aspect which is the most important from the SLR perspective, which can build in all the horizontal accountability that Matthew was discussing. In terms of engaging local authority, yeah, it is true, as you said, Woon, was the longer you engage, you can find solution way around it. But I think I want to flag that, and that is the added value having a local organization to work with SCLR in particular, because they know the context, they can broker relationship. SCLR is not a blueprint, so it needs to be contextualized. In all the examples that we heard, it was not the same model everywhere. Everybody said we need to adapt it to the context. And in the co-design, before starting to engage with it, you put on the table all the tiny aspects and you build them on the various tools that are available to take care of the local authorities, influence, and etc. We had a very, very different experience across the globe in terms of local authority. In some places they involved them, in some places they didn't involve them, playing around. I guess it is a bit of an art thing. It's not a blueprint. So, but it's fantastic to hear that so many different organizations are trying this modality in and learning and joining the group. So very happy to continue the conversation. And I heard a lot of advocacy to try to flag this type of approach across donors, different networks, groups. Yeah, that is fantastic to hear. Just in terms of question, just very, very briefly, sorry, I'm ranting, but In the pilot of Oxfam and DCA and their partner, how much was the budget of the pilot? Because that's another thing that we found in Christian Aid. When we started the pilot in like 5-6 years ago, it was always not enough money to get the attention of our local organization. And it's when we actually start putting the 100,000, the 200,000, where our partners could actually work with it, improve it, test it, really gaining experience and interest. And that was a game changer. But until we reach a certain amount, it's hard to also have an organizational change. Thank you. Over.
Tobias and Shreju, I let you answer the final points. Yeah.
I don't know, Valentine, maybe you can say something around the value, the amounts. Okay.
I mean, the question is for me, I think.
Okay.
I mean, for Oxfam, pilot work in Yemen, it's like Group Cash is part of the big project. It is one component. And under Group Cash, we have planned, to reach like 20 groups. And we have allocated like $5,000 US per group. But when we actually, when we implement, the project, we give, different amounts to different groups based on the ideas have come up with. And we know we have had, some kind of process. It's like a competition process. And also this process involves or requires, the group to come up with that project ideas with the support of Oxfam staff. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. I think we're running a little bit late, but Matthew, very quickly, if you have some final points to make.
It was just linking a bit to what Simone said about the financial value. One of the other things that we found a bit difficult is sometimes hard to ask an NGO to do a mindset shift if the SCLR component of their portfolio is small, because you're sort of, they're working in the traditional way with 90% of what they're doing. It's quite hard to then or even sometimes in the same sub-grant, you'll have a partner that's asked to do Group Cash or some or SCLR alongside another line of activity, which is often more traditional. And sometimes so there's definitely it's hard to get that mindset shift to the full transfer of power if it is just one line of a broader project, or this is one project of a much broader portfolio. So that's something to sort of consider, particularly when thinking about the scale of funds, to give people that security to really run with it and to really take on the full meaning of it, as it were.
Just to add maybe one last point on that, for the values, like for Oxfam, what we did was like kind of follow the guidelines, which had like 200 to 7,000 USD for groups, right? But we were like open that, the need should be coming from the community level. So if, for instance, for Poland, we made that 10,000 euros. So had like openness regarding how much we would get from the actual need and prioritization that was needed at that time. So we were very flexible on that. So I think that once we do one or two of those kinds, then we know like the general trend of it, and with the market assessments that we did, like, the common type of items that they were buying, or the services that they were seeking, or the trainings that they were wanting to include, then we had kind of ideas. So again, it's the flexibility and the context that helped us like go to an amount. But I think, that's also the beauty of it, but also a little bit of ambiguity. We must agree that the amount is quite flexible depending upon the area and the need, as it is multi-purpose.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with all of your points. Yeah, the values seem to be very much a strength and a weakness at the same time, I guess, because we're not really obliged to follow like other cash transfers, like the MEB and the sectoral approach. we are running a little bit over time, so we will have to continue those different conversation in the next meeting, but I'll pass over to Tobias now, who's going to present the next agenda point, which is the work plan for this task team. Over to you, Tobias.
Lynn, are you going to share the screen?
No, if you could share yours, that'd be great, but I'll put the link in the chat if you all want to, check out the work plan. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's okay. Let me share my screen. I hope you are seeing my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, looks
Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Yeah, maybe those who were there last time when we had our meeting with the team, we had these three objectives. The first one was for the mobilization, membership mobilization, where we wanted local partners to be involved, not only the international partners or international organizations or UN organizations, because this is normally done by the local partners or local groups. Then the other objective was to support on the guidelines, standard, and also around the research, learning, and practice. Then the third objective was for engagement and advocacy. So we have revised our activity plan, given that we have shorter time left for the year, for example, from May to December. So this one is just for the first activities for our core group meeting, where we have members who wanted to be part of the core group to meet on this every 2 months. But our meeting is guided by also the meetings for the bigger group, because remember, we are a subgroup of the cash and locally led responses. So it's guided by that, because we need to feed into that group or report or share notes with that main group, which is the cash and locally led responses group. So under the mobilization and awareness, or this membership mobilization, one of the activity that we want to focus on is this promotion. This is continuous activity that's ongoing, promotion of promote organization local engagement to participate in sub-working group. We want to increase the number and diversity of the groups, or through the communications and stuff like that, and channels like the group or website and emails and social media, where we involve maybe the cash working groups from different areas to share about GCT or SLR or whatever you want to call it, so that some local members or local groups like Subcon can participate. The other one is where we want to create this sort of a library. I know there's a library space for us, so we wanted to create this library for sharing. I think today, for example, we're a lot of learning, a lot of material that we can share, some of the guidelines around how can we make cash, sort of like the group cash transfer for flexible guideline around audits and stuff like that. So that's one thing that we can work around. Then the other one, support the use on GCT modality, where we as core group or leaders of the group, we can communicate. This is sort of like awareness, communicate through cash working groups or other platforms or webinars, where we provide some members on access to information around cash and group cash transfer, for example, maybe within the cash and locally led. Then the others, the second objective, the activity there, we have sharing of lessons learned and pilots, like what we are doing now, where we share some lessons learned, we see where there are blockages, where we can support, where we can, as organization, can change our strategies or be informed. The other one is consolidate this GCT presentation and material. I know other organizations could have some materials, could have some training materials. How can you train? What can you train on and stuff like that? What is the module? For example, one organization or one of our donors when we proposed this, they said, okay, you need to make sure you include PSEA, for example. You need to include protection issues for those groups, because what happens if they violate some of those humanitarian principles? So we need to put this guidance and also looking at our own guidance, the guidance that is available now. People were wondering, is it really covering everything? What can we include? What can we remove? You know, what new things can we include? You know, based on our learning, and for example, DCA or other colleagues or Oxfam, they have learned a lot, so they have something to say on the guideline that is available. So we want to make the guideline a living document. So it's one activity that we need to focus on, maybe look for a consultant at some point and work with that consultant. I know I spoke to somebody from Danish Red Cross, who Maya Toning, who was part of the who was part of the consultant developing that GCT. She really is waiting for some comments and what can be changed, and they can freely look at that. And also I mean, this is one of the webinars that we have done where we have wanted to pilot, the GCT. But what we wanted also is, under this research, we wanted to develop some of these research or learning tools or whatever, or a place where we can document all of our lessons, and sort of some webinars or some research document. I think this one is also linked to our advocacy component, where we need to dialogue with some of the donors. I know some of the donors, they put it in the document, like what Matthew said, like ECHO, they put it in the as part of their cash policy or cash guidelines. But when you talk to them bilaterally, or when you propose, some of the TAs may say no, or they may have these other fears of this unknown. So we want also to engage donors, want to engage some of the policymakers, and so that we need to have sort of a number of donor meetings, especially whether regionally or internationally. Then the other last activity that we are looking at is this research, because like I said, there are a lot of some gray areas around GCT. I presented to East Africa cash working group. They were asking what is the difference then between group cash transfer and cash for work. Do we regard this group cash transfer as a market-based approach, because we are no longer doing cash market assessments or market analysis and stuff like that. You know, all these gray areas that need to be addressed, and how other agencies are doing. So basically, this is our activity plan from now to December, and is open to colleagues who wants to participate, who have some resources. I know some of the areas may need some resources, who want to participate, whether in research or in this learning, or want to participate in membership drive, or in this advocacy, in this research. Maybe they are free to maybe contact us or contact Lynn to share their ideas, but now I'll open to the group to discuss, or what we need to add, or what you think maybe we need to remove, or what you think needs to be reduced or extended. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I'm not seeing the...
Great. So now I guess it's over to, I think, all of the members for their feedback, and in terms of areas that you think might be missing, areas that need to be strengthened, or really any comments. And Tobias, are you facilitating the rest of this, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can facilitate. And maybe also when areas where you think as an organization you want to participate more, it would be good. I see Matthew hand is raised.
Yeah, two quick things. One, on the guidelines, one thing that we could possibly do, I was thinking, is could we make it a separate word-based toolkit, particularly the annexes? I find that the tools are the best bit of the guidelines for me. But when they're in that long PDF, when I'm sharing it with people, it's quite frustrating for them, I think. So like a zip file of word tools, I think, rather than the PDF would be useful to have. And also on that note, I'll try and share some of the translations we have. I think we have done it ourselves on French, Myanmar and Arabic. I'll try, but they're all stored with partners. So I'll try and ask them to send them back to us so we can centrally store them. And then just a very other quick thing, I'll be happy to help contribute to the advocacy paper.
Okay.
If that would be, if that would be seen as useful.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think that's one thing that we had a lot of comments around that, to say if we have those tools, those guidelines, those templates in Word format, I think that will be important. Maybe something that we need to include in our library, Lynn, and also these other ones, the documents that are translated into other languages. Yeah. Any other comment, or anyone wants to participate in other activities?
Sorry, I can't raise my
sorry.
hand.
Chris, yeah, I can see Chris' hand. Sorry, I'm not seeing the full screen of who is raising, but I'm seeing Chris here. And
thanks. I'm sorry, I don't have. I'm trying to look through all of the work plan and understand everything that's there. I don't think I see anything which is like, having any sort of, whatever you want to call it, like a webinar series, or something whereby the learning and what is being discussed in this group, what I saw presented today, I think would have been really valuable to have presented to wider colleagues and stakeholders and actors as well, to really push forward those messages about, what are those common challenges, what are these differences, how can it be applied, what's the difference when we take it up to scale, to really convince, because there's a lot of work to do internally, to actually get GCTs or SCLR in our own organizations really, really utilized to its best capacities. And I think that sort of, even a short sort of webinar series, like, repeating even some of what went out today, I thought was brilliant. And just opening that up more publicly, I think would be about one of the best things that would support our work.
Yes, we have this activity called Share Lessons Learned, GCT pilot and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe we need to increase frequency of these, and also we, like you're saying, Chris, maybe target specific audiences with these lessons learned, or repeat it within the regional cash working groups, repeat it within other CULP webinars or something like that. That's what I'm getting from you.
Yeah. Just doing it across different groups, and then
yes.
So that's okay. Good. Sorry, I didn't pick up on that one as clearly now. But yeah, some more emphasis on how that can be developed.
Yes,
would be great.
Yeah, sure. We're noting that one.
Tobias, sorry, I'm just going to jump in because I can't raise my hand. But just on this, I think we have a really good opportunity. Today we'll be announcing a high-level policy initiative that is co-sponsored by USAID on, to really look at the levers of change in cash. And so one area of work will be focused on people-centered assistance, and another area of work will be locally led response. So I think group cash transfer spans both really well. And what we'll be doing for the rest of the year, we'll be having, a series of like workshops, roundtables, webinars where some of these examples can be showcased. So I think this is one that can really fit very well under that work. So yeah, let's certainly,
Okay.
you know, in the coming months, there'll be a lot of different opportunities to do that. I think I also wanted to add another point in terms of the advocacy paper. I think before maybe going into just an advocacy paper, we need to analyze maybe a bit deeper some of the blockages and what we actually want quite specifically, and then what will be the best ways to achieve it. So maybe just a step before the actual paper is a bit of stakeholder analysis, and you know, it might be also very helpful to have policy colleagues helping us in that as well, so that we make sure that, because it's not, group cash transfers is not just cash actors, it affects, as many of the presenters said today, so many different areas of the sector. We need to make sure that it speaks across and not just as cash people. So like, I know Simone was in the call. It sounds like he has a policy background. It'd be great if we can all lean on some of our policy counterparts as well to develop some of that messaging and tactics on the advocacy.
Yes, I agree. There's Tenzin's hand up.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I know in earlier discussion we were talking about training, and apologies if I'm not seeing it reflected here, but I didn't see that specific activity, like how we, you know, ensure the resourcing of that, and then, you know, the process and pulling from, I imagine there's, you know, many kind of iterations of training that organizations who are implementing GCT have already done, and kind of collating those, looking at, you know, what's kind of the most user-friendly materials, and then building them out from there, in addition to continuing to iterate the guidance and tools. So just want to share that comment. Thanks.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah, there's this activity where we wrote consulted partner GCT presentation and stuff like that. Yeah, we spoke about whether we want to put it as training, because we say maybe for individual organizations, sometimes the sensitivity around sharing their training materials and stuff like that. But maybe for presentations, yeah, I agree with you. Last time we were discussing around trying to have some trainings, some training materials. I remember even the East Africa Working Group at some point, they said, do we have some standard material or training material that they can quickly have or share? But I think organizations that, or partners that have some training material, please, you can share with us. Then we can, if you there's no policy against it, then we can put it in the library, so that other people can just take a look or change it to customize it to their own ways. I know Local to Global, where we borrow most of our learnings, especially around SLR, they have some training materials, and there was a talk last time that maybe we will try to link more with Local to Global, because they've done some of the research, so that we don't repeat what they've done, what is available already. Yes. There are two hands, but I'm not seeing who.
I think it was Tenzin just went, and now it's Shriju.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with the previous speakers on the suggestion, and particularly regarding the training bit, like maybe for the fundamentals of GCT or something like that. And I also wanted to like kind of understand other people's feel that, you know, in the GCT document that was in 2021, the guidance and toolkit, we have plethora of toolkits, right? And with these pilots that we have done by various organizations, which of these toolkits we found useful or we have contextualized, and maybe a review of those would be useful as well for people who want to go further.
Yes.
And sorry, I might just jump in, Tobias, too, on the comments on trainings. I think there is, sounds like there's certainly a need for trainings. I did want to flag too for if any of your organizations are able to mobilize resources to do that, I mean, they are very resource intensive, developing training, especially online training. So it's something I think that we need to think of as a group in terms of which organizations are able to fundraise around this potentially, and then it can certainly be plugged into the Kaya Cash Learning Hub. I think from CALP side, I have to say that the pipeline on training development is just quite jam-packed for a good year. So I'm not putting our hand up at this point. But I think no reason why we can't, as a group, look to other ways of fundraising and getting it done. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. I think my time is actually up. I took more minutes. Yeah. I will hand over back to you. Is it Lynn or?
Yeah, Noan, I think just has to
Noan?
jump off for now, so I'm happy to step in.
Yeah.
I think a huge thanks to the presenters, and I hope we can aim to share the recording as well as the PowerPoint to the presenters as well. Please do let me know if you do not want this shared, but ideally we can upload all those consolidated PowerPoints to the CALP library so that, and then also to share it with all of you as meeting participants. I think it was extremely interesting and very useful. I think one thing that we all need to keep doing, I see there's lots of different resources. Please do upload to the CALP library. And again, if there's any presentations or materials that are more sensitive, perhaps we can just create an in the SharePoint folder that's only open to the group cash transfer members. But wherever possible, let's aim to be as open as possible and share all this great learning on this. In terms of next steps, I think for the work plan, we'll share that around. Please do add any other written comments in there, perhaps. We'll give a timeline of maybe the next 10 days or so. We'll send that in the follow-up email, and then we can aim to share the finalized version and maybe come back to you if there are any other sticking points, if that sounds okay. But great, I think if there's nothing else, many thanks to all of you for a good meeting and lots of good learning and reflections on group cash transfers. We hope you have a good rest of the day wherever you are, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.